class one, race officer speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming. Okay, lowering faster here. Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10.5s and 42.
5s and 42.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us again. Hopefully you've listened to part one of our preview to the America's Cup, getting the pre-race lowdown from the two teams about to fight it out for the oldest trophy in international sport. It's a great way to set yourself up for the racing. We talked to Rossa's Francesco Bruni and Emirates Team New Zealand's Ray Davies about how the two teams were going just ahead of real-life Cup racing. In this edition, I'm in the Cup TV commentary booth with a man who I've spent an awful lot of time sat next to throughout my AC36 Cup experience. We spend almost every race day now sat here in this dark room, surrounded by monitors and TV gadgets, commentating on the racing. But he's also one of the most informed men in Cupland. I am, of course, talking about the legendary Kenny Reid. President of North Sales, AC36 commentator, two-time Cup helmsman. Well, I could go on. But Kenny and I are going to tee up the coming Cup match for you. But also, we've got a special guest with us. We're going to be joined by British Cup regular David Freddie Carr. Freddie was a nipper in the 2003 Auckland Cup on board GBR Challenge. This is his fifth Cup campaign. But as you'll hear, that doesn't make losing any easier. He's a passionate campaigner, a true credit to any team, a fact I can say with authority. He and I go way back. Freddie was sailing here with INEOS Team UK, of course, and won't mind me referring to him as the real backbone of the grinding team for Ben Ainsley. It's great to have him on the podcast. He joins Kenny and I as we look back on the Challenger Series, but also look forward to the Cup match. As you may know, there's been a slight period of lockdown ahead of the Cup, as the country of New Zealand continue their incredible efforts to stifle the spread of coronavirus. We're all operating under very strict guidelines here at the Cup. So in this edition, our planned sit down with Freddie happened via video link. Kenny and I are in the same work bubble, so safely recorded this under the relevant guidelines for that scenario. We're going to keep this intro short. We've got much to discuss, so we're going to get into things straight away. I hope you enjoy the time we spent previewing the 36th America's Cup.
To go out like that with a whimper instead of roaring like a lion, that's not cool. You can't sit back and say everything was okay, because frankly it wasn't.
Well, once again, Kenny, it's so good to have you back on the podcast. We've spent a lot of time together over the last 3 months, a lot of it in this very commentary box, mostly debating all things America's Cup. I hope you agree it's been a fun ride.
It's been an exceptional ride. A few stops and starts, maybe slightly unpredicted, but for the most part, well, we can't wait to get going again, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, there's been no 2 weeks the same. It's been incredible. Don't worry, Kenny, it's not just me for the entire 50 minutes. Freddie Carr from the British America's Cup team INEOS is hopefully calling in. But before he does, I want to recap on what our predictions were more than 2 months ago when we previewed the Prada Cup. It seems like a lifetime ago now. I mean, in our preview to the Challenger Series, Nathan Outridge, yourself and I, on the whole, agreed with each other. American Magic, we thought, was fast in the breeze, but we all had concerns that they'd already played all their cards, that they didn't have much further to go in the development department. The British, well, they had just suffered that humiliating weekend at the end of the Christmas races, and we all thought, even with a star-studded crew, it would take a miracle to turn it around, which of course they did. Day one, round robin, back-to-back wins, giving rise to your commentary line. No one expected this. Not even the Brits expected this. I mean, it was such a big moment.
Phenomenal moment. Something that I think none of us will ever forget. You rarely see turnarounds in sport like that. I mean, I guess in America's Cup history, the only other one would be the massive turnaround out in San Francisco, right, between the Kiwis and Oracle. But that was on a different part of the stage. This was. I mean, these guys were just struggling to go sailing, you know, right? And yeah, good for them. It was fun to see. If somebody put down a couple quid on INEOS going to straight through to the Challenger Finals, I think they probably would have made themselves pretty good amount of money.
And Luna Rossa, the Italians, I mean, our consensus was that they had for sure benefited from being the challenger of records, that they were a bit ahead of the curve. But we all had doubts, didn't we, about the dual helming scenario, how strong they were going to be under pressure, who would make the big decisions. We thought they could be vulnerable in pre-starts. And to quote you again, I mean, the tactical side looks a little scary. I mean, listening back, we weren't actually that far off the mark, were we? I mean, and did you think the best team won?
Well, at the end of the day, there's no question the best team won. What they won, I think, I want to say 10 of 11 or 11 of 12 or something like that, races in a row against the two arch rivals, and three what we all came into it thinking, three exceptionally well-funded, exceptionally, stocked full of talent programs. It's rare you don't see kind of a black sheep and the king and queen and then the black sheep, in these trials. We had a king, a queen, and another king all lined up at the top. No excuses. The old Dennis Conner saying, no excuse to lose for all three of them, really. And they all thought they had a good chance. Best team won. There's no question. A team that got on a roll, a team that had more progression in their boat speed, had more progression in how they handled the boat. They had gears, fast gears and slow gears that the others didn't have. Yeah, there's just absolutely no question the better team won.
I mean, being the challenger of record did buy them time, but they have used that time wisely. But I mean, they did look, I don't know, they just looked a step ahead, like they always had potential for more.
Well, do you think it is a coincidence that the two teams, the challenger of record and the defender, were the only two teams that still hadn't played their final set of foils when it came to the Christmas Cup, right? So that kind of, to me, upon reflection, and of course we are the king and queen of hindsight. Upon reflection, I think that was a big card. That was a telling card that they hadn't had to play those final foils until well after the other people. The other two teams, I think, always felt rushed, like we're on the back foot. We got to keep pressing forward, press forward, press forward. The other two, the challenger of record and the defender, they might have taken a few more deep breaths from time to time and said, well, let's relax and let's take a step back and have a good look at things. So yeah, it's a nice, I guess, time and money, and they all seem to have the right amount of money, but clearly two of the teams might have had a little more time.
It did turn out to be pretty eventful though, didn't it? And on a few occasions, quite emotional in this room. Both of us, actually. We had some moments here.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I know what it's like to lose in America's Cup trials. Yeah, I've done it, well, technically 3 times, really twice of which I was a primary player. And you just don't realize how tired, how much energy you have expended into a program. And I feel every time I see somebody eliminated, I feel for it. When we were watching American Magic, who trained in Newport, and I kind of followed through just from afar, they couldn't even get their foils to work that last race. It wasn't even as much the sporting side of it. To me, it was the emotional side of it. Oh, these poor people. I've just felt so bad for the fans and the athletes and the short teams and the families that have so much time and blood, sweat, and tears just baked into the core of these programs. I know what it's like. That's the only thing I can say, and it sucks. It's a terrible feeling, and to go out like that, trying to go out with a whimper instead of go out roaring like a lion. That's not cool. I don't care who it is.
I feel that even, at the beginning of every race, we chat over the dock outs. I feel the same even then. I can feel the tension myself, that what the day means, and not just to the guys on the boat, but to everyone who's there cheering them along. You feel that with them.
Yeah, that's by the way, that's part of why everybody wants to try to win this trophy, because there's not many parts of our sport that drum up that emotion, right? So bless it for what it is.
All right, let's talk about the first team to be knocked out, the Americans. Terry Hutchinson and his band of brothers at American Magic. I mean, a bit of time has passed since their dramatic capsize and their emotional return to the racetrack, followed by, well, I guess rather a predictable exit. I mean, first of all, what will you remember, Kenny, about that campaign?
A lot of sailing, kind of touted sailing, like time on the water, as their calling card, which really was the opposite of what the other teams, especially the Kiwis, the Kiwis went into Bermuda, for example, saying not sailing was their calling card, so in a way, kind of bucking the trend from the start as the modern day America's Cup team goes. And, it just felt, this is going to sound maybe a little too crass, but it felt like a sailboat racing team competing against a sailboat racing corporation, a boat race team. And you and I have had the ability to go into the Kiwi. The big comparison for me is to walk into the Kiwi center, the brain trust. There's like 60 people in their cubicle, backs to you, black shirts on, firing away on their computers. It's like, this is a machine. This is IBM and Microsoft combined. This is a bunch of smart people stuffed into a room, and you're not allowed to leave until we figure out a better way to do it. I think time has moved on from this being a boat racing program. This isn't a boat racing program. This is a boat racing corporation. It has to be run like a corporation. And so that it may not be fair, and I'm sure I'll get criticized for that comment, but that's just kind of what it felt like to me. And I know all those people in that program. I respect them more than I ever could imagine, and I know how hard they worked and everything else. And I'm sure they're going to come out of it and they're going to say, "Oh, that's where we got tripped up, and that's where we could have done better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." Like I said, hindsight is a beautiful thing, but they got a long way to go. Let's face it. They won their big race against the Kiwis, but the Kiwis, as it turns out, essentially had no hydraulic fluid that day. So in the Christmas Cup, and I think the Americans were too one-dimensional. Clearly, they're too one-dimensional, and I think they also completely, even though Terry Hutchinson's one of the best tacticians on the planet, they underplayed the fact that this is going to be windy, shifty conditions up against the beach often, and that a tactician was really going to be a big part of this. So I think there were plenty of flaws there. They never won a race when it counted, so you can't sit back and say everything was okay, because frankly, it wasn't. We all get judged on our scorecard, and their scorecard wasn't very good at the end of the day, unfortunately.
A first-time team, a new, very complex design to get your head around. I mean, was it really all just quite inevitable?
I don't think they thought it was inevitable at all. I know the New York Yacht Club didn't think it was inevitable. I think they really thought they had a path and kind of listen. All teams have to start at the beginning with a path. And do you stick to that path, or is that path built with a whole bunch of exit ramps as to when you think your path isn't perfect, you're going to go flying off this exit and try to go this way? I think they stuck to their path almost to a fault, right? And didn't take an exit at one stage or another. Again, the people inside that team know far more about this than we do, but I guess it is our job to just kind of take a look from the outside.
I mean, Terry's not fresh to the America's Cup. He's been involved for, as long as you were, the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. He's not fresh to all of this.
Yeah, but I mean, his recent familiarity is obviously exceptional success in TP52s and around the buoys racing in sailboat programs. And again, I don't mean to harp on this, but this isn't a sailboat racing program anymore. Sailboat racing program, you pick a commercial design team and a kind of a commercial engineering team and a commercial sail-making team and a commercial mast team, and you hope all those people sit in a room at some stage and talk about how they're going to put the package together. Again, not to go off script, but when we walk into the Kiwi, it's just different. You walk into the Kiwi compound here, and that one room just feels different to me. It feels like you're walking into Google, into one of those big open air sessions where they have just stuffed every smart person they can get out of every good university around the world, stick them in, lock the door, you're not leaving until we come up with a better solution. That's what it kind of felt like me up in that Team New Zealand place.
It's interesting you bring up their facility, because when I spoke in part one, I speak to Ray Davies, and he's faintly embarrassed by it because it's quite flash. They inherited it from the council for this run. He's like, it's got a lift and an escalator, and they've never operated like that before. I came down here to their last base. It was a scruffy old oil base with lots and lots of tents, and had not even a lick of paint on the wall. And that was always their culture. And I think they were a little bit worried, actually, by having the Google look. It just wasn't quite them.
There's no question it's not part of them. But did that make them better? Because all of a sudden they had to clean up what could have turned into, and by the way, we don't know if the Kiwis are good or bad right now. I'm sure we're going to talk about this. But what could have turned into a path of just, we're kind of the scruffy, gritty guys and girls, in the scruffy, gritty little shed, and we're the tough team. All of a sudden, they had to get a little polished. To walk in and out of that facility, you got to kind of look and feel a little more polished. I wonder if that's turned into a good thing for them that even they don't admit at this stage.
Well, as always in Cup World, Kenny, there's a lot of gossip, and we've had a little bit of time for gossip. We're in a lockdown here. It seems there's good vibes coming from the American outfit. I mean, hopefully they will be back. How important do you think it is for the Cup to see the New York Yacht Club return? And come on, I mean, you move in big circles. You're a member, right? What's the latest? What have you heard?
Well, listen, the New York Yacht Club is synonymous with the America's Cup. We've all said that a million times. But I think this time they mean it more than ever. I know the leadership there is passionate about leading and sailing. And leading and sailing means you get as one of my dear friends there keeps saying, you get a seat at the table when you're part of the America's Cup. And even the New York Yacht Club doesn't get a real seat at the table unless you're a participant. So having a seat at the table is important for the New York Yacht Club for all the right reasons, by the way. They are passionate about sailing. And I think they want to see the Cup move forward. I think they'd like to see the Cup move forward and make some changes to make it a little more viable for more teams to enter. I think their hearts are absolutely in the right place. I've had plenty of kind of semi-internal discussions with them about what at least their view of the Cup is going forward. But listen, this is all well and good unless the next winner wants to take on change. Change isn't going to happen. We saw this in Bermuda where all the teams wanted to go down one path except for one, and guess what? The one wins, and off we go in another direction. So the winner will determine, but the Yacht Club has absolutely put their money where their mouth is with regards to looking in the future and creating a potential playbook for a somewhat of a cultural change in the America's Cup that makes it more inclusive for teams to be able to join and participate on a fairly equal, never equal, well, that's the wrong word, on a more level playing field. Let's put it that way. It's all about funding, right? At the end of the day, Hap, Doug, the Petties, and the club members who have kicked in. It's all about the Benjamins, as they say, and if if they had fun, if they think there is a path forward, if they will come back. And yeah, everybody's saying the right things right now, and so that's a great sign.
That Saturday night, after losing those 2 races convincingly, was really hard. We effectively had 7 days as a sailing team to figure out how to use this new tool.
Okay, well, we did say it wouldn't just be the pair of us in here, but we're operating under lockdown conditions, so we can't actually have our next guest in the studio. But he's dialed in, and I'm delighted he has. Freddie Carr, the backbone of the INEOS Team UK power unit. Freddie, it's good to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Shirley. I love the podcast, I must say. When I'm doing my sort of 90-minute grinds in the gym, at low heart rate, they are a staple to keep me going. So it's cool to finally be on there.
He's sucking up to you right out of the block.
He's so sucking up.
This is unbelievable, Freddie. God, it usually takes a couple minutes for her guest to suck up to her. That is a world record.
I'm glad that I helped. Yeah.
I hope to get all the nice questions now.
Well, we want to know how you're doing. It's been a couple of weeks since the Prada Cup Final, and I know you're on holiday with your wife and gorgeous little boys. But yeah, it's tough, isn't it, Freddie? How are you getting on?
Do you know, I've really struggled this week. The week after you get knocked out, it's still around and amongst your teammates. You're in that mood where you're digesting what went right, what went wrong, and you're still in the environment. And then this week is a week off, basically, and just not being around the team, not being around, not having the camaraderie, and basically just going through the process of kind of putting perspective on everything by yourself. And you find yourself kind of, I don't know, for example, this morning I went for a big sea swim, and all I could think about was races 3 and 4, and you're trying to snap out of that mindset, but you just can't stop processing particularly the last 2 months, but the last 3 years. It's a funny place to find yourself in.
How is it reintroducing yourself to your wife and your kids? Because you don't see them very much for a couple of years. So that must be, I mean, has the family aspect of it? Just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reintegration into kind of what you would call normal life. I'm so lucky, as everyone in this game, Kenny, as you know, has got super supportive family. And if you don't have a supportive family about chasing this goal, then life is going to be really hard. And the weird thing about where I am now with my kids, I've got 2 boys of 6 and 11. Over the last 2 months, they've turned into America's Cup super fans. So we're doing these 90-minute drives around the Coromandel, and I'm getting all these geeked out America's Cup questions and why Pete and Blair replaced Dean in 2014 and who won the America's Cup in 2003. And it's just like, oh my God, these kids have just turned into like America's Cup super fans, and I can't actually get away from it.
No, that's great.
Freddie, you're going to have to put the podcast on, at bedtime. They can listen to that. Jimmy Spittle on the podcast.
That's it. That's right.
We know you're trying to forget it a little bit, but we just want to go back and chat a little bit about the INEOS campaign. It was so public, wasn't it, that pre-Christmas racing and what followed. But we're curious to know, really, when did the team know that you were potentially in trouble?
Yeah, I mean, we launched the boat as soon as I got out of lockdown, so that would have been beginning of October, and we launched the boat, and initially we sailed it in sort of 13, 14 knots, and we were like, oh wow, what a massive step up on what we had originally. Everything seemed to be going quite well, but we were acutely aware that we certainly weren't the fastest out on the hierarchy Gulf. And then we had a couple of days where it would have been sub 12 knots. And it really hit home that other teams were popping out the water and foiling well. And we weren't. We were really struggling. We were still having a toe onto foils, and to lead us into the first jibe and that kind of look. And the penny really dropped that we had a boat and a package that it was not where it should be, in under 12 knots. Now, we then spend the next month just digging and trying to figure it out. But that kind of took us into the middle of December, and that was the beginning of the America's Cup World Series. And that was such a funny feeling going into that America's Cup World Series, being forecast reliant, knowing that if it was going to be under 11 knots of breeze, we were going to be look pretty average. And then you chuck on top of that we had our cant system problems on the first day. We sailed well against Team New Zealand on the second day. We had a double race day against Team New Zealand on the second day and sailed well, although they were faster than us. But the day that really hurt for us was the Course B day, when we raced the other two challengers, American Magic and Prada, on the Saturday. And they just sailed away from us, that Saturday night, after losing those two races convincingly, and really seeing how far behind we were against the other two challengers, was really hard. And knowing the forecast for the Sunday, the Christmas Cup regatta day, what against New Zealand was going to be sub 10 knots, and there was every chance they were going to be foiling, and we weren't. That was as hard as it's ever been for me personally, pushing off the dock to go racing, to go out and know that it's going to be a real public dressing down, basically, on that Sunday, which it was. They lapped us. So that was a horrific day. But as I know you've spoken to Giles about, that Sunday night after the Christmas Cup, that was the line in the sand and the turning point for the campaign, because that was do or die. And we had a pretty monumental 4 weeks out the back of that.
But Freddie, with all the spying that happens, and it's really well documented, there is no spying rules. Essentially, you can go tie yourself alongside another boat and watch them go out practicing. This training in isolation, and that's what I've heard that phrase a lot, training in isolation, which led to not knowing, supposedly, you guys were that far off the pace going into Christmas. But with all the spying that happens, I find it incredible that you didn't have a better idea that there could be so many problems.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, Kenny. I think the reality is that we knew we had a bit on. Let's put it like that. And we were immensely proud of RB2, Britannia 2. But we knew we had a bit on, like I said, around October time. But you're not allowed to line up with anyone officially until we weren't allowed to line up with anyone within the protocol. So there's always that thing as a sailor. It's just like, perhaps maybe the shift went against us. They were sailing in a bit more pressure when you're loosely sailing around other boats. But it's not until you're chucked on the same start line with boundaries, with the sailing world watching, that it really, really hit home to us as a team, just the number of percent that we were off the pace. And I think we knew we were off the pace, but like I said, that America's Cup World Series, that was a tough one to take.
That Christmas period, just give us a bit of an indication of what that was like inside the team base. I mean, the light was on day and night, Freddie. How hard was that period?
It was phenomenally hard. It was phenomenally hard, first and foremost, for the design team. They realised that there was a problem with what was going on with the boat. I mean, with the foils at high flap angles, we had a problem with what was going on in the boat, and we had to figure out how to solve that problem. And the pressure that was put on the design team at that moment from mid-December to lead up to Christmas to specifically identify the problem that was wrong, and then come up with a solution to fix it was huge. And then that pressure shifts onto the shore crew to deliver the solution. And then ultimately we get the let's call it the fixed boat around the first week of January. And we had about a week to figure out how to sail this modified boat. Now, on top of that, we improved our aero package massively. You would have seen that, as Kenny noted in his commentaries, about the change of our mainsail setup over the 2-month period. That was huge. But we effectively had 7 days as a sailing team from the kind of first week in January to the start of the round robin to figure out how to use this new tool. But as soon as we put the boat back in the water, with everything within about 2 or 3% of what I would call finished, after the designers figured out the problem, we knew that the changes that they had made and the shore crew had implemented were huge, and we were back in the game.
Listen, we all do a little bit of everything on boat racing programs, but I think what people are interested in is how compartmentalized these modern day teams are. So I'm assuming while the rest of the team is trying to make this boat fast, you guys are still, you're in the training mode. You're in the gym all day, right? You don't have to go. You don't have tools in your hand, right?
No, we don't have tools in our hand. I mean, fundamentally now, a lot of it is when a boat goes down for a maintenance day. Whereas sailors coming up through the IACC classes that I cut my teeth in, you could very much get involved in a maintenance day, be it pulling apart winches, doing rigging, kind of getting involved with the basic hydraulics that were on that boat now. And I tell you, if our sailing team tried to get involved in servicing an AC35, we wouldn't be sailing for the next 2 years. Like, it is so complex now. What you do as a sailing team member is have a broad understanding of the system, but there's absolutely no way that you would be able to go on and kind of get involved too much with the hardware. And then when you're talking about the software side of things, where 6 guys get on at the end of the day and plug their laptops in and start putting in dashes and zeros and changing the milliseconds that something fires at, then yeah, we'd just stand no chance. But it is we are kind of kept hugely up to date with what is going on when, and what changes you'd expect to see on every sailing day, and then you feed that back to the shore crew and feed that back to the designers and say whether it's had a positive impact or neutral or a negative impact in terms of making the boat go faster through the water.
Freddie, we don't talk much about the grinding talent in the broadcast, do we, Kenny? There never seems to be a massive amount of time. Kenny always wants to talk about sales, so that's kind of it.
Exactly.
But what we have seen is that, at the end of the race, how broken the grinding team is. Freddie, give us a bit of a glimpse into what it's like, how hard, you're actually having to work.
Yeah, it's really hard. You are up in that last 10% of your heart rate zone for that 25-minute race. Now, as you guys well know, at INEOS we ground pretty much with 6 grinders the whole time, whereas most other teams had 8 grinders. Now, the reason we did that is to free up Giles to be an out-and-out tactician, and when he wasn't doing tactics, he was helping flying the boat, and it frees up Lee McMillan and Luke Parkinson, our pilots, as well. So we had kind of 3 people dedicated outside of what would normally be in the grinding squad. So that automatically puts another 20% of workload onto the grinders. Now we saw that very early on. 2 years ago, we kind of wrote that into our race boat, and we then assessed that if we grind forwards the whole time on an individual pedestal, as opposed to having 2 grinders on one pedestal, you're about 17% more powerful. So we thought that we made up for the loss of 2 grinders with our system. And then you add on top of that we felt that we were in pretty good nick going into it as well, that we could cover off the loss of those 2 grinders. Now, in terms of the concentration levels and what people are doing on board the boat, out of our 6 grinders, 2 of them were trimmers, so Joey Newton and Nick Hutton, and the other 4 were out and out grinders. So it could be easy to assume that all they're doing is heads down, grinding away without really a care in the world. But you'd see on our boat that we had displays in front of each grinder. So on that display in front of each grinder, you had the tactical app. So without looking outside of the boat and getting your head up, you could see what was coming up on the race course, where you were next to the boundary. And every grinder also had the data around the specific thing that they were controlling on the boat. So each grinder of the 4 main grinders had something that they'd be contributing to make the boat go faster as well. So it was a way of offloading the pilots and the mainsail trimmer and the trimmers in another way, so that those guys could be more heads up on the race course, basically freeing up the talent and taking away kind of a couple of menial tasks away from those guys as well in the heat of battle. So you're there within your sort of last 10% of heart rate, and you're doing, for example, the runners or the mast rotation or something like that. And although it's not like a key differentiator for boat speed, it's one of those things that if you're wrong by 5% on, let's say, the run attention, which was my job specifically, it could be half a knot VMG. So you have to be dialed into the rig setup and that side of things as well.
Would you do it that way again? And as a follow-up to that, tell us about just a little bit about your fitness regime to get you guys to where you had to be. Because again, this is no sailboat racing fitness regime, I'm guessing. This is slightly more serious.
Yeah. In answer to your first question, Kenny, would we do it that way again? Yes, I would. I was immensely proud of where the grinding group got that drivetrain. Now, there's things on that drivetrain that in my 20 years of the America's Cup, we've been talking about putting on boats, but never got there. And with the help of Nigel Rosewall and our links with Mercedes, we were able to put things into our drivetrain that could have the proper America's Cup trickle down. Now, I'll be a little careful of what I say, because obviously we have great aspirations to go again and challenge again. But there were some things in that drivetrain that should stay in the sport forever. It's stuff that's obvious, and I can't go into it too much. I'd love to tell you all about it, but you should see on TPs and mini maxis and big offshore boats, because it just makes sailing so simple. And in terms of the training, the training was hectic. Proper 15 hours a week, of which 12 would be grinding. Now we have a link. We sit under the INEOS Sports umbrella, so we kind of have a really good group of resources and doctors and sports physicians and human performance guys. You have to look at the cycling team, the long distance running team with Eliud Kipchoge going under 2 hours, the number of football teams that are now owned by INEOS, and that pool of people coming together and looking at sailing very much as a endurance sport, as opposed to a sport where I started out, where you were kind of like a repeat sprint athlete, like a rugby prop forward that would have to go and work really, really hard for 7, 8, 9 seconds and then have 30 seconds rest and then keep doing it again. We really shifted our thinking to be an endurance athlete, and it was really hard training. Like I said, it was often 12, 15 hours on the grinders in the gym a week, and that's before you've stepped on the boat. But some of the wattages, we talk in a world of wattages, some of the wattages that we were putting out with our arms were close to, if not more than the cyclists do with their legs. So we were in pretty good nick by the time the cup came round.
Freddie, we're not going to grill you on INEOS, but before we move on, I want to ask you really about the gaffer, about Ben. I mean, this is your second campaign with Ben, but this time he seemed so calm and composed throughout the whole thing. I mean, every day, however bad it had been, he faced the press, and I hadn't really seen him really take on that leader role to that extent before. Not really. How different was he in this edition?
No, I completely agree, Shells. I think this version of Ben Ainsley that we saw going into this cup, and as you would have known through all your Olympic cycles with him, was a different guy to certainly the guy we saw in Bermuda, and then the guy sort of don't get Ben angry kind of Ben that we all know and love as well. But he was he was superb in his leadership, and the speech that he made to the whole team on the Monday morning after the Christmas regatta, where we were in a bit of a pickle. That speech was phenomenal in the boat shed about sort of the focus and the fortitude that we'd need to get through the next month to get ready for the racing. That really struck a chord. And the speech that he made with Grant Simmer and Sir Jim Radcliffe after we got eliminated out the Prada Cup final were bloody good. To be honest, they were Churchillian speeches, and he was superb throughout the whole cup. You know, on and off the water.
All right, enough INEOS chat. Let's look at the two finalists. There's still racing to be had here in Auckland. What do you know about Luna Rossa? You know, you were part of their setup for a while for the AC34, weren't you? I mean, they seem at every stage of the Prada Cup just to get better and better. I mean, how would you describe their whole kind of thing, their whole package?
Yeah, I mean, I was with them in San Fran in 13, and the one word I would use to describe them is passion, Shirley. Like their passion for the sport, their passion for the racing is unbelievable. And I think that can be really, really good. And I also think that every so often it might not necessarily be that good. Their boat and their package that they've got for this cycle is impressive. You know, I was, when they went through the repechage against American Magic and they won that 4-0, and you followed their sailors and their press releases and the press conferences, and they were making these claims of finding sort of 10% more speed. I was really skeptical. And then we came up against them in the final, and I don't think the increase was as big as they said it was, but they had certainly got faster in between the end of the round robin and the start of the Prada Cup final. And then you've got Jimmy and Keko, you know, their pre-start world was really solid. It was very methodical, but very hard to break down. They had found a formula, particularly when entering on port, that it was hard to beat them as the starboard entry boat. They had a very formulaic way of getting an even, if not better, start. And I think potentially what you saw with us in races 3 and 4 in the Prada Cup final was us trying to upset their rhythm a little bit too much, which in the end was to our detriment because they were the worst two starts that we had. Light airs, they're very good. In over 15 knots, I couldn't really tell you that yet because we didn't really get it against them in the Prada Cup final. But you know, they've come out now. They've got a really solid package, and they're going to be tough to beat in the pre-start.
What about the Kiwis, Freddie? I mean, now you're out. What was the inside line on them? You know, do you think they're beatable?
Yes, they are beatable because it's sport. But my gut feeling with my pundit hat on is they are super fast. I've seen nothing of the kind of loose lineups when people are sheeted on the same tacks against each other where they've ever been slower. I think they might just have a lick of speed. And as you and Kenny well know, like the fastest boats win the America's Cup and make tacticians look pretty incredible at calling wind shifts. Now, the one thing I would say against Team New Zealand, well, maybe not against them, is I'm not sure if I kind of quite buy into this. They haven't been racing like Prada has, and that's a fact. But seeing Ray Davies in their chase boat, their big sort of fast chase boat, acting as the opposition against Pete Burling, I'd say that's some of the most intense manoeuvring I've seen this cup cycle. Like Razor is absolutely taking it to those guys, and they are throwing the boat around really well.
It must be pretty stressful, don't you think, driving the chase boat at 40 knots in the pre-start?
Oh man, like we obviously did a lot of it as well, and you know that you're the guy that's going to mess it up as the chase boat driver. You kind of are going to be the guy that's in the wrong the whole time, and if the boat gets a lot of leeway, like when we were practicing coming off the line with the chase boat to leeward, and they're sitting there right next to the foil, and you're doing sort of high 30s, low 40s coming into the boundary. And then your chase boat driver drops his arm like it's going to be a board drop. It's all pretty bizarre. And I'd much rather be on the race boat than in the chase boat. That's for sure.
Oh my God, has this sport changed? It's actually unbelievable to listen to you talking about it this way.
Yeah.
But okay, so with that said, as a follow-up to our girl Cheryl's last question, is there a possibility on this race course with this style of boat and shifty conditions that maybe for the first time ever, the fastest boat doesn't win the America's Cup?
Do you know, you could have a good point there, Kenny. Now, we know through when we raced the Prada Cup Final, I think we were in level 2 of lockdown, which basically ruled off course C because they were worried about the groups of people congregating on North Head to watch the racing and the global pandemic. They didn't want that, which is understandable. I thought personally that took a big feather out of our cap, because that's where you guys would have seen in the round robins, Giles and his relationship with Ben really came into its own. Now, it would be interesting to see what lockdown level we're in when we go into racing. I believe it's going to be on Wednesday, depending on the lockdown level. But if we're in level 2 and that course C area isn't available, I reckon that's a bad thing for Prada. I think they want the wind shifts. I think they want the kind of randomness and the heads out the boat style of sailing and overtaking lanes, because if everything is to be believed and Team New Zealand are that smidge quicker, you kind of want the chaos of that stadium race course to come into play. So it'll be interesting to see what Ian Murray says, what race courses are available to him for him to use.
Oh, Freddie, we like the chaos of that stadium course in the commentary box, so we're very much hoping for that. Freddie, a massive thank you. Please enjoy your break with the family and promise to come back on the podcast. We'll have to have the Freddie Carr bumper edition. Thanks a million, Freddie.
No worries. Thanks for having me on, Shirley. See you, Kenny.
See you, Freddie. Thank you.
Okay, Kenny, let's get back to it. Let's look forward now. I mean, it's just days until the Cup kicks off. What do we think about Luna Rossa? I mean, there's been a bit of time now, hasn't there, between play? Will we see another step up? Have they bought more sails?
You can never buy enough sails. So, man, I hope they have. I am not privy to their quiver of sails. That's one of the nice things about having firewalls all over your company that have to deal with the big fancy teams like this that want to keep everything secret. So guess what? They keep it secret. There is one factor that I think was really unsung in this whole thing, and that is low speed maneuverability, especially in the pre-starts. Low speed maneuverability won them 2 of those pre-starts, like physically won them the starts. And I wonder if they can carry that forward against the Kiwis. We know that their foils are somewhere along the 25 to 30% larger in size. So inherently, they should be able to have better low speed maneuverability. And then can they use that low speed maneuverability in the pre-start to their advantage and just get out in front? Because I think everybody agrees as the boats have become almost perfect, and not to equate this to Bermuda again, but that flight time we had, in the finals, if you were at 98% flight time, you made a mistake. That's how perfect these boats were. These guys are essentially at 100% flight time now. All the teams, they're not making mistakes anymore. So once you get ahead, it's hard to pass. And I think the Italians could make it hard. If they can win a couple starts, they could make it difficult, especially in that lighter stuff.
It was interesting, wasn't it? We had lots of doubts in the beginning about their pre-starts and the decision making, but actually they could sail round everyone. The maneuverability was just so strong. They just could do what they wanted.
They broke out that high and slow mode that one start, and I think surprised certainly I went back and looked, and we were all like, whoa, look at this. And remember, by the way, everybody at home, we're privy sometimes to a lot of the practice sailing that the boats do, because we get to walk. There's cameras all over these boats, right? So you and I walk into the production area, and we go down in the far right-hand corner and sit back, and we watch these guys practicing. In fact, we can even hear them. We're probably giving away our secrets. Now they're going to be quiet. We can actually hear them talking on the boats in all the pre-start and what they're practicing. And they were practicing that high, slow move. I think these are premeditated, game plan driven pre-starts. Like, let's go with, like a American football. Let's go with 42Z box 3. Well, you don't want to go 4? Let's go 3. No, we're going to go 3. And I think they have plays like that. And I think they have set plays. And let's see how Philippe Cressy can come out of the blocks and come up with some cool new plays.
When I interviewed Francesco a few days ago for part 1, I mean, he looked tired. This pace, Kenny, month after month, it's full on. I mean, what are your experiences of this scenario? One team have battled and battled to get this far, and one of them is just kind of sitting there waiting to join in. I mean, two very different build-ups.
But I think you can battle yourself into submission, right? You can pummel yourself, and there is a fatigue factor. There's no question. I just remember during big campaigns having a day off and having never felt like that before. Like, you start to breathe again, and your whole body just shuts down. It's just 24 hours, and by 4 p.m, you've had 3 naps, and you just can't get off the couch. And you're supposed to go play with the kids, and you're supposed to do this, and you're supposed to clean your room and everything else. It's like, forget it. It is battle fatigue, and so does that battle fatigue turn into more ability, more cunning ability, or do you get worn out? Is the next punch to the gut going to be the first one that really starts to drag you down? So far, all those punches to the guts, they've just come right back swinging and had all to fight for. That's for sure.
Yeah, one more push. I mean, also the culture there. It was unbelievable when they won the Prada Cup Final, and all the breaks came off. It was wonderfully full of Italian emotion, but it seems like Jimmy, with the help of his longtime coach, Philippe Cressy, was really keeping it quite methodical and cool. It's a different culture, I think, than we've seen before from Luna Rossa.
I think you screamed, wow, this is an Italian program or something like that when Francesco jumped in front of them. I mean, essentially jumped on Jimmy's back and started yelling in Italian. And hey, I bet they can flick that switch again, though. It's worked for them so far, right? So whether it's Jimmy and Philippe bringing in a different culture, or them sitting back on their last debrief saying, emotion gets too much of us here, we have to somehow tone down the emotion and even playing field. You win, you keep cool. You lose, you keep cool. There's no question that is a factor in sport that works. It's a winning strategy, whatever the sport. So, hey, good for them. However the culture has become more defined within the program, it's clearly working. And like I said, and don't quote me on the number, but to go 12-1 against your 2 arch rivals, who we all thought was going to be an incredibly competitive event, they turn it into a non-competitive event. So obviously they're doing something right.
What about Jimmy? I mean, he's been sort of uber cool here, hasn't he? But more than I can ever remember. I mean, almost like a little bit aloof with it all. Can he raise his game for this big final?
Yeah, I worry sometimes that you try to put too much on your own shoulders. Don't feel like my advice to him would be just do what got you here. Don't try to do too much at this stage. Don't read the hype. God, put the media away, put the social media away. Don't read the hype. Be yourself. Don't try to do too much here. You don't have to win the races. Let your boat, let your team do what you've trained to do. So don't try to do too much. That's my big fear for the Italians. I have to admit, obviously, I'm just an elite athlete, and He's enjoying the moment. Let's be frank. He's enjoying the moment, and good for him. He deserves it.
All right, the Kiwis. I mean, there's been chat here of them breaking 60 knots. I mean, I have my doubts, but what have you heard, Kelly?
I think if they broke 60 knots, this is, again, completely out on a limb, there would be bits and pieces of AC35 all over the Hauraki Gulf. There's no way. There's no way. And, but yeah, they just feel, I guess they feel confident, right? You go down to the coffee shop here in the morning, it's like the Kiwi reunion. You want anything, we're giving away our secrets again. You want to just shoot the breeze with any of their sailors or any of their key shore team guys, you just go down to the coffee shop right down here around the corner about.
Give it a shout out. Rushworth Coffee Shop.
Exactly. They come in pretty late, I have to admit. But again, all these teams, it's actually really interesting. They've all adapted their schedules to this 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. It's like training for football, or any soccer football game, and knowing that your games are going to start at 8 o'clock at night, you start practicing at that time. So they're all leaving. They come in late and they leave late. And it's really an interesting day that they all have right now. But yeah, they want to talk about anything other than sailing right now. They're like, yeah, no, we're good on sailing anyway. So what about,
Let's talk about their boat. I mean, it's a stunning piece of technology. It just looks right, doesn't it? I mean, the Defender obviously came up with the design. They've had more time to get their head around it. The team are out sailing all the time. I mean, loads of hours on the water. How hard, Kenny, do you think they're going to be to beat?
Oh, they're going to be super hard to beat. They sailed, I think in their terms, and this is probably too harsh a word, but I think they sailed pretty lousy in that Christmas Cup and still won the event. Usually us mere mortals, if we sail lousy, we don't win the event. They still win the event after not sailing very well. So they had a jump then. I saw Ben in an interview the other day, and he said they would have been pretty nervous if they had figured out a way to get out of that round against the Italians and move into the finals. From what they've seen, they'd be pretty darn nervous. So that's all you have to say for Sir Ben to say that they're pretty scary looking, then that says something.
I think he used the word intimidating.
Intimidating. That's even more dramatic a word. Isn't that incredible? Yeah, I didn't see that coming, but that gives you a little bit of an idea. Listen, the refinement of the boat, you don't come up with that concept unless you could see the vision of the concept all the way through, right? So this is their concept, and it's going to start here, and you have to have a pretty good idea in the back of your mind what the pathway of this concept is going to be. Some of the other teams didn't even think the concept was going to work, right? So that's how non-tunnel driven they were. I think these guys saw the light at the end of the tunnel from a long time ago, and that's where they are right now. And I think they've even surprised themselves with some of the things that they've learned and some of the things that they've created. Let's face it, it's Kiwi ingenuity. That's what, every time I've sailed with a boat full of Kiwis, that's what they do. Somebody sitting around having a beer or a coffee says, hey, what about? And before you know it, it's built, it's done, it's tested, and it works. It's the way it happens around here.
You always need a Kiwi on the boat.
Well, I'm not going that far, of course.
Now, look, the Cup, we've been watching New Zealand television. I mean, the Cup is on telly all the time here. I mean, every second advert is Cup related. Yet the team are really low profile. I mean, there's minimum access apart from in the coffee shop. I mean, they're tight. The black jersey, it means something here, doesn't it? I mean, what do you think of their approach to it all? You were in the Cup here, weren't you? I mean, does it feel like the Fortress Team New Zealand, you up against the team of 5 million?
Well, that's a great question, because the team of 5 million, there is always this undertone of animosity here, that it's, somewhat government funded, and there's always this almost this downplaying of it in different factions, whether it's political factions or community factions, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, everybody is a Team New Zealand fan, no matter what. So you can have your differences of opinion. You can go to the press and say, why aren't we funding this program versus the rich sailors, yada, yada, yada. Everybody is a Team New Zealand fan. And people, like you said it just best, they wear that black shirt very proudly. Whether you bought it in the local t-shirt shop or you were presented it as being part of the team, man, do people wear it proudly. And that is a very cool thing to see.
Ray Davis said something quite interesting. I mean, I asked him, what was at stake and kind of how big a moment this was. And he said everyone in that team is really aware of the guys who've come before in Team New Zealand, who've, that they've been part of this to get them here. And so they feel a huge responsibility to deliver, not just for themselves or for New Zealand, but for all of those guys. And it has been a 30-something
1987, right?
Yeah.
1987, Perth. And came darn close to making it to the finals that time in their first time out. Sir Michael Fay, right? So that is a really, really, I want to say adult, but I mean, that's an incredibly cool way of looking at it. You know how you got there. You don't take it for granted. You know how much blood, sweat, and tears went into it. It also leads to like what Terry or even Ben have said about first-time teams, kind of not ever saying it, but alluding to it, don't really have a chance quite yet, even though I think both teams thought they did. The Prada team's been doing this since 2000, and the Kiwis back to 1987. So there's something about culture, created culture. There's something about success, and you have to look at the Prada team and how much success, how many times they've been to the Challenger to the Challenger finals anyway. And now this is the second time into the finals. Success breeds success. It means you're doing something right. But good for them for realizing that the forefathers were critical in the success of what they do, and they kind of have to carry the flag for them. That's good. Congratulations. That's well done by them.
So that's our preview to the America's Cup. I'm excited to finally see how it all unfolds. I mean, the America's Cup never really runs to a script. Something always goes on. I mean, how are you feeling about it, Kenny? And what do you think we're going to see?
Well, okay, so we kept getting asked predictions all the time. So now here's my turn to ask you a question. So what's your prediction? What do you think? Do you see this? I mean, some say whitewash, others say toughest series ever, somewhere in between, yada yada yada. Do you see? Okay, do you see the Italians running away with this?
No.
Do you see the Kiwis running away with this?
There's potential for that.
And okay, so if you were to, let's take a guess at a final, just a pure guess at a final score. You want to lay it out there or no?
No.
This is like when we did our pre-show before. We were all firmly on the fence.
To me, everything looks right in the Kiwi team. I can't see a weakness, even although we haven't really seen them properly for quite a while. It just all looks right. And as you say, they're a talented bunch, aren't they? None of them are kind of fresh and new. They've done it all before, and I can't see them being nervous but on the other hand, stuff happens at the Cup. Even thinking back to Bermuda, they looked like they were running away with it. They capsize. There's drama and intrigue, and and that's why we love it. So I don't see it being a whitewash. I mean, I think there'll be plenty of intrigue.
So you kept commenting about the confidence, almost cockiness of the Italians leading up to this last series. I think one of the comments by Francesco Bruni was, "There's nothing about the British boat that's special," or things like that in public. Do you think the Italians carry that bravado into this series as well, or you think we see them back away?
I mean, I can't see that.
That would be a pretty bold move, but hey, if it got you this far.
I mean, we obviously, you know, I'm at the press conferences and I interview them. I mean, it was an odd thing to hear Francesco Bruni say. It's just so out of character. He's not like that. You know, he's not that sort of punchy. But I think they were really confident in the team and particularly confident in their hardware. And the more confident he got, the more he puffed his chest out.
So you don't see them doing that this time?
I don't. I think that would be foolhardy.
So that's going to be fun to watch, though. Now we have a few extra days to look at this. I think it's going to be really fun to watch. I really do. Yeah,
and I'm excited because we haven't actually seen the Kiwis for such a long time, have we? Not really. I mean, they've occasionally joined in practicing, but it's been a rare occasion.
So my final comment is that if the last we had seen of the Kiwis was that Christmas Cup, I would be really nervous about their sailing, that they had the ability, I think you said, get battle tough. And there is no question the Italians are the more battle tough teams. That is undisputable. But there was one practice session the world didn't get to see, and we did get to see, right? 2 or 3 days of practice racing. First day, the Kiwis not only were average, but they flipped the boat over. They got smoked in every single pre-start, flipped the boat over. They looked beyond average. I think they got a lashing that night. And the next practice day, they came out and smoked everybody. Burling whipped everybody in the pre-start. If that's the Kiwi team we see, they're going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think when, you know, if all goes to plan for the Kiwis and they eventually tell their story, that day that only we saw and the public didn't see, when they were schooled by Ben Ainsley and Jimmy Spittle in the pre-starts and then capsized, you know, will be a crucial day. I mean, they will not have forgotten that moment. And just speaking to their coach, Ray Davies, in part one, you know, that was a wake-up call, I think.
There you go. Good for them to also admit it.
Kenny, it's been an absolute pleasure. As always, many thanks again for coming back on the podcast. You're welcome anytime. Come any day. It's been a great chat. Thank you. And I'll see you right in here in a couple of days.
Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So that's our preview to the 36th America's Cup. I hope you've enjoyed it and it's helped get you race ready for next week's action. A massive thanks to Kenny Reid. Love working with that guy. And also to David Freddie Carr. Thanks for interrupting your holiday to dial in. It's really appreciated. Racing should get underway soon, but as I record this, we still have COVID restrictions and it's still all to be confirmed. But watch out online for the final details. Please do get in touch. We love your feedback and it's important in the podcast world. So please let me know what you think and review and subscribe on whatever platform you're joining us on. As ever, the podcast is produced by Tim at Vertigo Films. He lovingly crafted the pod after he was done with his day job here at the Cup. So there were some late nights. A huge thanks for your continued unwavering hard work and enthusiasm. Love you, Tim Butt. And a final word about the TV here in Auckland. You know, making live world-class telly is like the ultimate team sport. There's a lot of people involved and many of us have been, well, putting the sport of sailing on TV for quite a while. When it all works, it's an amazing thing to be part of. And when you're as invested in the sport as we are, it's important that it's done right. I hope you enjoy the broadcast. There are lots of people here trying very hard to bring you the very best pictures, the clearest audio, and tell the story in a way that not only helps you get it, but also draws you into the drama, the people, and the unique quality of the America's Cup. Anyway, enough from me. That's all from us in Auckland. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the 36th America's Cup and stay safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1, race officer speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming. A bit lower and faster here. Still gaining on there.
We're looking at 10.5 to 42.
42.
This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.